I'm Leo, I'm 29, and I had to get a restraining order against my own mother and brother after they tried to squat in my $500,000 beach house. Before I tell you how a judge ordered them to pay my $12,000 lawyer bill, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It all came to a head on a Friday I'll never forget. I wasn't there physically, but I was there in every other sense. I was 200 miles away in my quiet city apartment, watching my life get systematically dismantled on a 6-inch screen. My phone didn't ring. It sent a notification. A cold, impersonal, digital alert from my home security system. Motion detected, Wilmington property, front porch. My heart didn't just beat faster. It slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled with the phone, my thumb tapping the notification. The live feed flickered, then stabilized into a scene of utter disbelief. There it was. A big, ugly, orange and white U-Haul truck parked haphazardly on the gravel driveway of my sanctuary. My place. The $480,000 beach house that represented years of 60-hour work weeks, skipped vacations, and relentless saving. And orchestrating the chaos, standing there with his hands on his hips, was my brother, Ethan. My mother, Eleanor, was marching toward the front door with a keycard clutched in her hand, her posture screaming ownership. A second notification popped up, a digital nail in the coffin. Front door, unlocked. And it was immediately followed by a third, the one that escalated everything. Alarm system triggered. The piercing, electronic shriek of the security alarm blasted through my phone's tiny speaker, a sound I had only ever heard during routine system tests. On the screen, I watched the scene dissolve into panic. My mother flinched. Ethan swore, a word I could read on his lips even from miles away. A loud, automated voice, a voice I had personally selected for its commanding tone, echoed through the property. Warning. Unauthorized entry detected. Police have been notified. My phone immediately started ringing. Ethan. Of course. I let the alarm scream through my speaker for another 2 seconds, a petty but deeply satisfying act, before I answered. What the hell, Leo? He yelled, his voice barely audible over the siren. Turn this thing off. We're trying to move our stuff in. You're not moving in, Ethan? I said, my voice dangerously calm, a stark contrast to the chaos. You're trespassing. Don't be a damn jerk. Mom said it was fine. Just turn it off before the whole neighborhood comes out. I watched on the feed as my mother, her face a thundercloud of fury, snatched the phone from his hand. Leo, you stop this nonsense this instant. She shrieked into the phone, her voice vibrating with indignation. You're embarrassing us in front of these movers. You're embarrassing yourselves? I replied, my voice hard as ice. The police are on their way. I suggest you get your things and your truck off my property before they arrive. There was a moment of stunned silence, a pocket of quiet in the storm of the alarm. Then her voice dropped, laced with a familiar venom I had known my whole life. But this time it was concentrated, lethal. If you do this, she hissed, her voice trembling with a rage that felt ancient. If you send the police after your own family, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are not my son anymore. The line went dead. But the story didn't start there, in that cinematic explosion of threats and sirens. It started, as it always did, with a simple phone call a few days earlier. A phone call that was the quiet planting of a seed for the toxic forest that was about to grow. The seed was planted on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk, deep in the satisfying monotony of finalizing a quarterly marketing report for my job at Velmark Automation. It was the kind of focused work I loved, a world of data and results that made sense, unlike the chaotic emotional landscape of my family. My phone buzzed, dragging me from my spreadsheet. It was Ethan. A familiar sense of weariness washed over me. I almost let it go to voicemail, a self-preservation tactic I'd honed over years, but on a whim I answered. Hey, what's up? I said, injecting a false brightness into my tone. Leo. Hey man. Big news, he announced, his voice a booming performance of bonhomie. It was the voice he used when he was about to ask for something. Chloe and I are making a big move. Oh wow, that's great. Where are you headed? I asked, allowing myself a fleeting moment of genuine curiosity. To the coast, buddy. We're packing up the last of our stuff now. Figure we'll be there by Friday, just in time for the weekend. A cold, metallic dread began to snake its way up my spine. The coast? You mean Wilmington? Yeah, exactly. To your place. Mom mentioned you're hardly ever there. Said it's just collecting dust. So it's perfect, he said. His tone is casual, as if he were telling me he was borrowing my lawnmower. She said you wouldn't mind. I stopped typing. The cursor on my screen blinked, mocking the sudden paralysis that had seized me. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. In the background, I could hear Chloe, his girlfriend, ask him if he'd remembered to pack the espresso machine. The sheer domesticity of the question in the face of this monumental violation made my head spin. Ethan? I said, my voice low and measured, enunciating every syllable. You cannot move into my house. He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. The sound someone makes when they can't believe their obvious, God-given right is being questioned. What? Dude, come on. Don't be like that. It's just for a little while. Temporary. A few months, maybe 6 tops. Just until I get my new crypto consulting venture off the ground. Mom said you'd get it. Family helps family, right? That's what she always says. Family asks first, Ethan. I shot back, the dam of my patience beginning to crack. That house is mine. I own it. I have a mortgage. I pay the insurance. I pay the property taxes. It is not a family asset. The answer is no. Wow, he said, the fake cheer instantly evaporating, replaced by the sullen, wounded tone of a spoiled child. I see how it is. You get a little bit of a salary bump, buy a beach house, and suddenly you're too good for your own brother. You know, Mom is going to be incredibly disappointed to hear this. She's going to be crushed. He hung up, just like that. The classic Ethan maneuver. Make an outrageous demand, get rejected, then retreat behind my mother's emotional shield. I stared at my phone, my hand trembling with a rage that felt old and tired. Mom's going to be crushed. It was the checkmate move in their twisted little game, the emotional blackmail that had funded his entire adult life. Predictably, not even 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. Caller ID Mom. I took a deep breath and answered. Leo, what is this I hear from your brother? He's absolutely heartbroken. Eleanor's voice began, smooth as silk and dripping with practiced disappointment. Mom, he didn't ask for help. He informed me that he was commandeering my house, I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. Don't be so dramatic, she chided gently. You know how he gets excited. He just needs a safe place to land for a little while. You have that big, beautiful house sitting empty 90% of the time. What is the harm? It's the least you can do. We sacrificed a lot to make sure you had the opportunities you did. Sacrifices. The word hit me like a physical blow. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I was the one who worked 2 jobs through college to graduate debt-free. I was the one who lived in a tiny, run-down apartment for years, saving every penny for a down payment on my first rental property. Their sacrifice was not charging me rent after I turned 18, something they held over my head like a holy relic. Mom, with all due respect, my answer is no. He cannot move in, I said, my voice hardening into a resolve I hadn't felt before. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Cold, calculating silence. Then, she dropped the bomb that would ignite the entire war. Well, that's a real shame, Leo, because it's a little too late for that. I already gave him the security code and the spare keycard. They're packing the U-Haul as we speak. The blood drained from my face. Felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. You did what? You gave him access to my house? The house I explicitly told you that key was for emergencies only, like a fire or a flood. Don't be selfish, Leo, she said, her voice turning sharp. He's your brother. Sometimes family is the emergency. If he shows up on my property, I said, my voice now a low tremor of pure rage, I will call the police. I swear to God, Mom, I will. She scoffed, a sound of utter disbelief. You wouldn't dare. Then she hung up. I was left in the echoing silence, the dial tone a mocking hum. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conspiracy. And my own mother had just handed the enemy the keys to my castle. After those back-to-back calls, work was impossible. The numbers on my spreadsheet blurred into an indecipherable mess. I pushed my chair back and walked to the window of my apartment, staring down at the city traffic below, but I wasn't seeing it. I was seeing a highlight reel of my own life, a long series of moments where my boundaries had been treated as suggestions, my resources as communal property. My mother's words, "I already gave him the code," weren't just a betrayal in the present. They were the echo of a dozen past betrayals, a pattern I had been too close to, too young, too cowed to see clearly until now. I was 16 again, standing in the dappled afternoon light of our old kitchen. I could almost smell the faint scent of pine sol and my mom's coffee. I'd just come home from my summer job bussing tables at the Salty Pelican, my worn jeans heavy with the day's tips. I had $3,000. $3,000. All cash, saved in an old Nike shoebox under my bed. It was my freedom fund, the down payment for a beat-up but functional 1998 Honda Civic I'd found. It was my ticket to not having to ask for rides, my first real taste of independence. My mother was at the kitchen sink, her shoulders slumped. She turned, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Theatrical tears. I know that now, but back then, they were terrifyingly real. "Leo, honey," she'd said, her voice a carefully constructed tremor. "Ethan, he's in a bit of a jam. He got in over his head with some people. It's not serious, not dangerous, just a debt he can't cover." My teenage heart hammered. What kind of people? How much? I'd asked, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. $3,000, she whispered, looking away as if she couldn't bear the shame. "I know it's a fortune, honey, but you've always been so responsible, so good with your money. It would just be a loan. I promise, we will pay you back, every single penny, as soon as your father gets his Christmas bonus." I looked at her, at the masterful performance of a worried mother, and I felt the weight of the world on my skinny shoulders. He was my older brother. She was my mom. This is what you did. You helped. So I trudged upstairs, the floorboards creaking under my feet. I pulled the shoebox from under my bed. The crisp bills felt like my future, and I carried them downstairs and handed them over. The relief on her face was my only reward. Of course, the Christmas bonus never materialized, or if it did, it wasn't used to repay me. When I finally got the courage to ask about it a year later, as I was looking at another, lesser car, my mother looked at me with a genuinely baffled expression. "Leo, family doesn't keep score. That money helped your brother out of a really tight spot. You should be proud you were able to do that for him. Don't be petty." Petty. The word stung more than the loss of the money. I had sacrificed my dream for their irresponsibility, and I was the one being called petty. The memory faded, only to be replaced by another. I was 22, fresh out of college, trying to build my own credit score. Ethan, true to form, had flamed out of another job and needed an apartment. But his credit was a wasteland. Once again, it was my mother who acted as the ambassador of his needs. "He just needs a co-signer, Leo," she'd pleaded over a Sunday dinner. "It's just a formality. The landlord just needs to see a stable income on the application. You won't have to do anything." "I can't, Mom," I had argued, for once trying to stand my ground. "If he defaults, it ruins my credit. I'm trying to get a loan for my first investment property." Tears welled up in her eyes again. "So you'd rather your brother be homeless? Living out of his car? Is that the kind of family we are?" The pressure was immense, a physical weight in the room. My dad just stared at his plate, offering no support. So I caved. I signed the lease. For 12 agonizing months, I lived with a knot of anxiety, calling Ethan on the 5th of every month to remind him that rent was due. He eventually broke the lease with 3 months remaining, leaving me on the hook for the remaining balance and a collections notice that haunted my credit report for 2 long years. It delayed my first property purchase by 18 months. An inheritance of debt I didn't create. I turned from the window. My apartment, my job, my life. I had built it all not just for myself, but in spite of them. And the beach house, that was different. That wasn't an investment. It wasn't a means to an end. It was the end. It was my fortress of solitude, a monument to my escape, and they were coming to tear it down. This time, I thought, a cold resolve hardening in my gut. This time, there would be no shoebox full of cash. There would be no signature on a lease. This time, I had steel locks and a security contract. This time would be different. The anger was a clean, cold fuel. It burned away the years of resentment and guilt, leaving behind a sharp, clear purpose. I strode back to my desk, my movements precise, and pulled out my laptop. There would be no more pleading, no more arguing. The time for words was over. This was a tactical problem now, and it required a tactical solution. I logged into my OmniGuard security account, my fingers flying across the keys. The dashboard showed a serene image of my front porch, a cruel irony. I navigated to the user access panel. There they were, listed in plain text, Eleanor Miller Master Code 2. Cleaning Service Guest Code. With 2 satisfying clicks, they were gone. User deleted. User deleted. I then created a new master code, a long, complex alphanumeric string that I would never share with another living soul. Next, I went to the protocol settings, the brain of the system. I scrolled down to the trespassing alert protocol. It was set to the default, a silent alarm to my phone. I changed it. Audible alarm, on maximum volume. Automated voice warning, on. Strobe lights, on. And then, the most important setting, emergency dispatch. Immediately notify local law enforcement. I clicked Save Changes. The click of the mouse echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. I had just armed my home, turning my sanctuary into a trap. It took less than 20 minutes for the first tremor of my counterattack to be felt. My phone rang. Ethan. What the hell, Leo? He snarled the moment I answered. The code doesn't work. Mom's sure she gave me the right one. Did you do something? I changed it, I said. My voice as flat and calm as a frozen lake. The silence on his end was heavy with disbelief and indignation. You what? Why in the world would you do that? Because, Ethan, as I told you very clearly, you are not moving into my house. This shouldn't be a surprise. This is completely insane, he sputtered, his voice rising in pitch. We've already paid for the U-Haul. Chloe quit her job yesterday. You can't just back out now. You're ruining our lives. You're the one who built your plans on a property you don't own and permission you never received. I said, do not go to my house. Oh, we're coming anyway, he threatened, his voice dropping into a low, menacing register. We're already halfway there. We'll figure it out when we get there. I'm sure we can find a way in. A window will probably be unlocked. He hung up with a sharp click. A direct threat to break into my home. A part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in the idea of family, recoiled. But the bigger part, the part that was now in control, simply noted it as another piece of evidence. A few minutes passed. My phone rang again. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, my guard fully up. Leo? It's Chloe. A small, nervous voice whispered. Ethan's girlfriend. This was an unexpected development. Hi, Chloe, I said, my tone carefully neutral. Look, she rushed to say. I wanted to apologize. I honestly had no idea he hadn't asked you first. He told me it was all arranged, that you were excited to have us. I feel like such an idiot. It wasn't arranged, I said. I know that now. I tried to talk to him after he got off the phone with you. He's livid, Leo. He's not thinking straight. He's not going to back down. We're still driving there right now. Was this a genuine warning, a moment of conscience? Or was it just another angle, a good cop routine designed to soften me up? In the end, it didn't matter. The outcome would be the same. I appreciate you telling me, Chloe, I said, keeping my voice unreadable. I have a really bad feeling about this, she said. her voice trailing off. "I don't think this is going to end well." Then the line went dead. I put the phone down. She was right. It wasn't going to end well. But for the first time in my life, I was the one who had set the terms of the engagement. They were driving into a storm of their own making, and I was the one holding the lightning. Friday arrived not with a bang, but with a low, humming anxiety that vibrated under my skin all day. I tried to distract myself with work, but my focus was shot. My eyes kept darting to my phone, the OmniGuard security app open on the screen, displaying the static, peaceful image of my front porch. It felt like watching a bomb, waiting for it to detonate. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the bomb went off. The thumbnail image on the app refreshed, and my heart seized. There, in my driveway, as real and ugly as Ethan's threat, was the U-Haul truck. This was it. The surreal was becoming real. They were actually doing it. I tapped the screen, maximizing the live feed. The high-definition camera captured every detail with brutal clarity. I saw Ethan jump out of the driver's side, his body language a cocktail of arrogance and irritation. He slammed the door and began surveying my property as if he were a feudal lord inspecting his new domain. Chloe emerged from the passenger side, her movements slow and hesitant. She wouldn't look at the house, her gaze fixed on the gravel at her feet. Then, my mother's silver Lexus pulled in behind the truck, blocking any chance of a quick retreat. She got out, her purse slung over her shoulder, and took in the scene with an air of complete ownership. It was her expression that truly chilled me. There was no doubt, no guilt, only entitlement. Two other men, burly and unfamiliar, climbed out of the U-Haul's cab. Hired movers. The audacity was breathtaking. I sat there, a silent, invisible sentinel, as Ethan began to direct the show. "Okay, let's get the big sectional first. Let's get it through the front door and out of the way." My mother, the matriarch of this invading army, walked confidently up the porch steps. I watched her tap the code into the electronic keypad. The small LED light flashed red. Access denied. Confusion flickered across her face. She tried again, slower this time, as if the keypad were the one at fault. Red again. Ethan saw her struggling and jogged up the steps. "What's wrong? Did you forget it?" "No, I know the code," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "It's not working." "Let me try," he grumbled, shouldering her aside. He punched in the numbers with aggressive, jabbing motions. The red light was his only reply. He slammed his open palm against the doorframe, a sharp crack that the camera's microphone picked up. "That little bastard," he seethed, his voice a low growl. "He actually changed it." My stomach dropped as I saw my mother reach into her purse. Her hand emerged clutching the emergency keycard, the one I had given her 2 years ago with the strict instructions. "This is for a fire, a flood, or if you think I'm dead inside. Nothing else." I had completely forgotten about it. A fatal oversight. She swiped the card. The LED flashed green. The deadbolt retracted with a heavy, final-sounding click. The moment the door swung inward, my digital counteroffensive was launched. The world erupted in a cacophony of sound and light. The alarm I had armed went off, a deafening, high-pitched shriek designed to disorient and panic. On my phone screen, the hired movers physically recoiled, one of them dropping the end of a sofa. The new strobe light I'd activated began flashing, bathing the porch in frantic bursts of white light. My phone screen was a cascade of alerts. Front door, unlocked. Alarm system triggered. And then the voice. Warning. Unauthorized entry detected. Police have been notified. It boomed from the external speakers, a voice of disembodied authority. The scene on my screen was pure chaos. Chloe had her hands clamped over her ears, her face pale. The movers were looking at Ethan, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fear, clearly communicating. "This is not what we signed up for." My phone rang. "Ethan." I answered, and the sound of my own alarm system blasted back at me. "Turn it off, Leo. Turn it off now," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You're trespassing, Ethan," I said, my voice a chillingly calm island in his sea of noise. I warned you not to come. I don't have time for your games. The neighbors are coming out of their houses. Just turn it off. No, I said simply. The police are on their way. Perhaps they can help you. I could see him on the camera, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. His eyes darted around, looking for a solution, a way to regain control. They landed on the large picture window next to the front door. I saw the desperate, stupid idea form in his mind. Silence the internal speakers by breaking the window. Don't even think about it, Ethan, I said into the phone, watching his real-time reaction. That's breaking and entering. Felony. You want to add that to your trespassing charge? They have you on a high-definition camera, you idiot. He froze. His head snapped up, and his eyes found the dark dome of the camera. The realization washed over his face. He was being watched. He was caught. The fury in his eyes was replaced by the impotent rage of a trapped animal. Miles away, holding my phone, I felt a grim, steely satisfaction. The trap had been sprung. The man-made shriek of the alarm was soon overlaid by another, more ominous siren growing louder in the distance. Within minutes, the flashing blue and red lights of a Wilmington Police Department cruiser washed over the chaotic scene, reflecting off the windows of the U-Haul and my mother's pristine Lexus. The spectacle had just been given an official audience. I watched, my breath held, as a tall, broad-shouldered officer stepped out of his car. He moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace that suggested he'd seen it all before. Officer Davidson, as his name tag would later read. He approached the porch, his expression a professional mask of neutrality, and addressed Ethan first. Ethan immediately launched into a frantic, high-speed explanation, gesticulating wildly towards the house, his phone, and the movers. My mother, ever the performer, rushed to his side, clasping her hands together in a display of worried, maternal innocence that I knew was as fake as a $3 bill. She was playing the part of the confused, wronged matriarch. My phone rang again. An unknown local number. This was it. Sir, this is Officer Davidson with the Wilmington PD. A calm, authoritative voice said. I'm at 142 Ocean View Drive. We have a residential alarm activation. There's a group of individuals here claiming to be the owner's family. They say they have permission to be here and are just having some trouble with the security system. Can you confirm your identity and clarify the situation for me? My name is Leo Miller, I said, my voice perfectly steady. I am the sole owner of that property. And to be crystal clear, officer, they do not have my permission to be there. They are trespassing on my property. There was a brief but significant pause on the other end. Okay, sir. I want to be 100% clear on this. You are stating that the individuals here, an Ethan Miller and an Eleanor Miller, do not have your consent to enter this residence. That is correct, officer. I explicitly, verbally, forbade them from coming to my property. They chose to ignore my directive and used a keycard I had given my mother for dire emergencies to gain access against my will. And what would you like us to do, Mr. Miller? He asked, his tone all business. Do you want us to simply have them leave the premises? Or do you wish to press charges for criminal trespassing? This was the moment of truth. The final, unbreakable boundary. Years of resentment, of swallowed anger, of being the family ATM, the family fixer, the family doormat. It all came down to this single binary choice. I looked at the live feed on my laptop. I saw my brother, sputtering and indignant. I saw my mother, her face a mask of aggrieved innocence. They had pushed and pushed, and now they were about to find out what happened when I finally pushed back. I want to press charges, I said. The words felt solid, real, like laying the cornerstone of a new life. I want them cited. I want this officially documented. Understood, Mr. Miller, Officer Davidson said. I watched on the screen as he turned back to my family. I couldn't hear his words, but I saw their effect. Ethan's jaw literally dropped. My mother's face went through a rapid series of micro-expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, pure, unadulterated fury. She lunged towards the officer, trying to grab his phone, to plead her case directly to me. He calmly held up a hand, stopping her advance. She then spun around, her eyes scanning the porch until they found it. The small, dark dome of the security camera. She knew I was watching. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at the lens. Her voice was now loud enough for the camera's microphone to pick it up. A shrill, distorted shriek. "If you do this," she screamed, her voice cracking with rage, "you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are not my son anymore." Officer Davidson spoke into his phone one last time. "Sir, we will be issuing citations for trespassing to all adults present and will ensure they vacate the property immediately. A full report will be filed. You'll be contacted if we need anything further." "Thank you, officer," I said, and hung up. I didn't turn away. I watched for another 20 minutes as they were forced to humiliatingly reload every box, every piece of furniture, back onto the U-Haul under the watchful, impassive gaze of a police officer. They looked small, pathetic, their arrogance stripped away, leaving only their raw, ugly entitlement exposed to the salty air. And I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I just felt quiet. The storm had hit, and I was still standing. The immediate aftermath of the police leaving was a profound and eerie silence that lasted for precisely 1 hour and 14 minutes. It was the calm in the eye of the hurricane. Then the other side of the storm hit, a furious onslaught of digital and emotional warfare. My phone, which had been quiet, began to vibrate on my desk with a relentless, buzzing fury. It was a coordinated attack. Text messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, people whose number I barely recognized, began to pour in. "Aunt Caroline, Leo, I have just heard the most shocking news. To call the police on your own mother? Your grandfather would be turning in his grave. I am deeply, deeply ashamed. Uncle Robert, your mother is devastated and inconsolable. Whatever this is about, you need to be a man, pick up the phone, and apologize to her immediately." The messages were a blur of a single, unified theme. I was the monster. I was heartless, cruel, ungrateful. I had forgotten the meaning of family. It was obvious that Ethan and my mother had been working the phones, frantically spinning their version of events. In their story, I was the unstable, newly rich villain, and they were the innocent victims of my inexplicable cruelty. But the main theater of war was, predictably, social media. Ethan, a master of the victim narrative, posted a long, rambling screed on his Facebook page. It was accompanied by a carefully staged selfie of him and my mother, her head on his shoulder, both of them looking weary and heartbroken. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "I don't normally air my private struggles," it began, a classic opening for someone about to do exactly that. "But today my heart is broken. As some of you know, I've been going through a tough time trying to get my new business off the ground. My own brother, Leo Miller, who has been so fortunate and successful, offered us a place to stay in his empty beach house to help us get on our feet. We were so grateful. We spent money we didn't have on a U-Haul, packed up our entire lives, and drove for hours. We arrived only to find he'd changed the locks and had the police waiting for us. He had us cited for trespassing. His own mother. I guess some people forget where they came from once they get a little money. Feeling completely betrayed and lost. The post exploded. The comments section was a digital witch hunt. Hundreds of them. People I had grown up with, distant relatives, friends of his I'd never met, all rushing to light their torches and sharpen their pitchforks. "That is disgusting. Family is everything. Wow, Leo Miller. I thought I knew you. What a cold-hearted snake. Ethan, I am so sorry. Your brother is a monster. Don't let him get you down." Reading it felt like being physically pelted with stones. It was a public character assassination, executed with brutal efficiency. Even Chloe, his girlfriend, who had called me with a supposed warning, had liked the post. So much for her conscience. With a cold, methodical detachment, I started taking screenshots. The post, every single comment, every vitriolic text message. I saved them all to a new folder on my laptop. I labeled it simply, Evidence. The final salvo of the evening came via a phone call from my Aunt Caroline. I was a fool to answer it. "Leo, I have never in my life been so ashamed to call someone my nephew," she began, her voice trembling with righteous fury. "Your mother, your sainted mother who gave you life, is in hysterics. You have broken her heart. You need to fix this. You need to delete those police charges. Call your brother, call your mother, and you need to beg for their forgiveness." "Forgiveness for what, exactly?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "For protecting my property from a premeditated invasion?" "Oh, don't be so ridiculously dramatic," she sniffed. "They just needed a little help. It's what families do." "No," I said, my patience finally atomized. "That is the last time I will ever have this conversation with you or anyone else." I hung up the phone and then, with a profound sense of relief, I turned it off. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, the silence no longer eerie, but a welcome, protective blanket. They had launched their emotional blitzkrieg, and as the initial shock and hurt began to fade, they were replaced by something new. A cold, hard, and utterly unbreakable resolve. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a war, and I was just beginning to fight back. For a few days, the assault was confined to the digital realm. A war of whispers and accusations. But I knew my family. A public shaming was never going to be enough for them. Their thirst for drama and retribution was far from quenched. They needed to escalate. The tangible proof of that escalation arrived a week later via certified mail. A crisp, legal-sized envelope that felt ominously heavy in my hand. I had to sign for it. As the mail carrier left, I stared at the return address. A law firm I'd never heard of. A knot of pure dread tightened in my stomach. I tore it open. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents, held together by a large clip. The top page, in stark, bold letters, read, "Civil complaint for defamation, libel, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." My own mother was suing me. My hands started to shake as I scanned the pages, disbelief warring with a dark, cynical sense of inevitability. The complaint was a work of pure fiction. It claimed that I had maliciously orchestrated the police incident to publicly humiliate and defame my mother, causing her severe emotional trauma, damage to her reputation in the community, and mental anguish. She was demanding $75,000 in damages. It was so ludicrous, so completely detached from reality, that for a moment I thought it had to be a joke. My first call was to a lawyer. I spent an hour online, researching litigation attorneys in my city, finally settling on a woman named Patricia Davies whose reviews consistently described her as a shark and brilliantly strategic. When I got her on the phone and explained the situation, from the initial phone call to the lawsuit I was holding in my hand, there was a long, thoughtful pause. "Mr. Miller," she finally said, and her voice was everything the reviews promised, sharp, confident, and utterly unimpressed by my family's theatrics. "What you have on your hands is what we in the legal profession call a SLAP suit. It stands for a strategic lawsuit against public participation. In layman's terms, it's legal garbage. It has no merit and is not designed to win. Its only purpose is to intimidate you, to harass you, and to bleed you dry financially with legal fees until you give in." "So what do we do?" I asked, a sliver of hope cutting through my anxiety. "We don't just fight it," she said, and I could hear the grim smile in her voice. "We countersue for malicious prosecution and make them pay for every single penny you spend on my retainer. Send me every piece of evidence you have. Every text, every screenshot, every recording." As if the universe had a dark sense of humor and wanted to test my resolve further, the very next day, I received a call from a Detective Reeves from my local police department. "Mr. Miller, I'm following up on a complaint filed against you this morning by an Ethan Miller," he said, his voice a flat, procedural monotone. "He's alleging that you made a series of verbal threats of physical harm against him over the phone during a dispute." "He is lying, Detective," I said, a wave of profound exhaustion washing over me. "It's the other way around. He's the one who threatened to break into my property. It's a classic he said situation, sir. Do you have any proof to back up your claim? The detective asked. A small, grim smile touched my lips. As a matter of fact, I do. My state is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. I have a full, unedited audio recording of every single phone call. I'm emailing them to your official address right now. I sent him the audio files neatly labeled. 2 hours later, Detective Reeves called back. His tone noticeably changed. Mr. Miller, I've reviewed the audio evidence. We will not be moving forward with Mr. Ethan Miller's complaint. In fact, based on this recording and his sworn statement, it appears he may have committed a misdemeanor by filing a false police report. Thank you for your cooperation. They were throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something would stick. A bogus lawsuit, a false police report. But they made one critical, catastrophic mistake. They assumed I was still the same person I had always been. They had no idea I was quietly, methodically documenting every single lie. The attacks metastasized, moving from the legal system to the very core of my stability. My career. An email with a high-importance flag landed in my inbox from our head of human resources. The subject line was chillingly corporate. Formal complaint review mandatory meeting. I walked into the glass-walled conference room feeling like I was on trial. Across the large table sat Gerald from HR, a man whose job was to mitigate risk, and my regional director, Melanie, a woman I respected immensely. Gerald looked deeply uncomfortable. Melanie just looked serious. Leo, Gerald began, nervously shuffling a thin file folder. We've received a series of anonymous complaints filed through the corporate ethics hotline. The complaints allege a misuse of company resources. Specifically, that you are conducting personal legal battles on company time and using the company's network and equipment to harass and digitally stalk family members. The air left my lungs. It was a vicious, calculated lie, designed to paint me as unstable and untrustworthy. It was an attempt to get me fired. That is an absolute lie, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I turned my full attention to Melanie. All of it. I know, Melanie said, her voice cutting through the corporate jargon. Leo, you've been with us for 5 years, and you're a top performer. This doesn't track. So I want you to ignore the speak for a minute and tell me what the hell is really going on. So I told them. Everything. The beach house, the trespassing, the police report, my mother's insane lawsuit, the social media smear campaign. As I spoke, I took out my phone and airdropped the evidence folder to my laptop, projecting the screenshots onto the conference room monitor. I wanted them to see the vitriol, to read Ethan's lies for themselves. When I finished, the room was silent. Melanie looked at Gerald, her expression hard. This isn't a misuse of company resources, she said, her voice firm and decisive. This is a targeted harassment campaign against our employee. They are trying to sabotage his career. Gerald, our official position is that these claims are baseless and malicious. I want you to log this as such and ensure there is no mark on Leo's record. We protect our people. The relief that washed over me was so profound it almost made me dizzy. To be seen, to be believed by someone in a position of authority, it was a powerful antidote to the years of my family's gaslighting. But Ethan, in his infinite stupidity, wasn't done. The very next afternoon, the receptionist's voice came over my desk phone, strained and uncertain. Leo, your brother is here in the lobby. He says it's an emergency. My blood ran cold. I walked quickly to the lobby, and there he was, leaning casually against the sleek reception desk, a smirk playing on his lips. What are you doing here, Ethan? I demanded, keeping my voice low and level, conscious of the other people in the lobby. He pushed off the desk and took a step closer. Just wanted to see where the big shot works. Nice place, he said, his eyes scanning the corporate logo on the wall behind me. It would be a real shame if something happened to your cushy job. All this could go away, you know. Your promotion, your nice salary. It's amazing how fast things can fall apart. His eyes were cold, the threat barely veiled. The security guard, Tom, a large man who missed nothing, was already rising from his chair. You need to leave, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Now. He held my gaze for a moment longer, a look of pure malice in his eyes. You'll regret this, Leo, he whispered. Then he turned and strolled out as casually as he had arrived. I stood there, my fists clenched, my body trembling with adrenaline. He had brought the war to my doorstep, to my job, the last safe space in my life. And in doing so, he had just handed me the final, irrefutable piece of evidence I needed to end this. For good. That night, the adrenaline from the workplace confrontation had curdled into a cold, hard resolve. I sat in Patricia Davies's office long after her other clients had gone home. The city lights twinkled outside her window, a stark contrast to the darkness we were wading through. After I recounted Ethan's visit and his veiled threats, Patricia leaned back in her leather chair, her expression grim. That's it, she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. This is no longer just a slap suit and a family dispute. This is aggravated harassment. He crossed a line that the court will take very, very seriously. We're filing for a temporary restraining order tomorrow morning. Against both of them. For the next 2 days, we worked relentlessly, transforming my folder of screenshots and recordings into an ironclad legal weapon. Patricia called it our shock and awe package. It was a thick, heavy binder, meticulously organized and tabbed. It contained the official police report from the trespassing incident, color printouts of every hateful text and social media post, a transcript of Ethan's threatening audio recordings, a notarized, 4-page sworn statement from my boss, Melanie, detailing the workplace confrontation, and the detailed financial summary I had compiled, showing bank transfers and check copies that proved I had given my family over $42,000 in the past decade. It was a devastating, undeniable chronicle of systematic abuse. The emergency hearing was set for the following week. A strange sense of calm settled over me. The chaos of the past few weeks had finally coalesced into a single, sharp point of focus. There was no more confusion, no more guilt. There was only the path ahead. Then, 2 days before the hearing, as I was going through my evidence one last time, a message request popped up on my Facebook profile. The name was Clara Bellwether. I didn't recognize it, but her profile picture was of a smiling woman with a dog that looked vaguely familiar from Ethan's old photos. The message was short and to the point. Hi Leo, my name is Clara. You don't know me, but I used to date your brother Ethan about 3 years ago. I saw the public post he made about you and the house, and I felt sick. It's the same thing he did to me. Please, if you have a minute, I think we should talk. It's important. My heart began to pound a heavy, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I accepted the request and sent her my phone number. She called within 60 seconds. Leo, she said, her voice a little shaky but firm. I am so sorry to be digging up old history, but when I saw what he wrote, the language he used, calling you selfish, painting himself as the victim, it was like I was reading a script from my own life. For the next 30 minutes, Clara laid out a narrative that was so eerily similar to my own. It felt like she was reading from my diary. She had dated Ethan for a little over a year. She was a pediatric nurse, and she had just bought her first condo. At first, Ethan was the perfect, charming boyfriend. Then, slowly, the entitlement began to seep through the cracks. It started with little things, she explained. He was always between jobs and short on rent. He moved into my condo just temporarily, of course. Then he just never left. He started to resent my career, my salary. He made me feel guilty for buying new scrubs, for going out for dinner with my friends. He had this bizarre mentality that my money, my home, should be our money, our home, even though he contributed nothing. My stomach churned. It was the same poisonous mindset, the same script. The breaking point, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, was when I came home from a brutal double shift. I found him in my bedroom with my jewelry box open. He was trying to pry the diamond out of my late grandmother's engagement ring. He claimed he was just getting it appraised, for me as a surprise. I just knew he was going to sell it. When I confronted him, he exploded. He didn't hit me, she clarified quickly, but he backed me into a corner and punched a hole in the drywall, right next to my head. His eyes, Leo, his eyes were terrifying. I was completely silent, the phone cold against my ear. I got a restraining order against him the next day, she said, her voice regaining its strength. And he did the exact same thing to me that he's doing to you now. He smeared me all over social media, told all our mutual friends that I was emotionally unstable and abusive. He tried to destroy my reputation. Your brother, Leo, he is a parasite. He finds people with resources and stability, and he tries to break them down until he can take what they have. I thought you should know who you're really dealing with. And I am more than willing to sign a sworn affidavit detailing every single word of this, if you think it would help. When I hung up the phone, I felt a profound, chilling clarity. Every last molecule of doubt, every lingering ghost of familial guilt, was vaporized. This wasn't just about a house or money. This was about stopping a predator who hid behind the shield of family. Clara's story was the final, devastating piece of my arsenal. And with it, I was ready for court. The courtroom was small, impersonal, and smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee. I sat ramrod straight beside Patricia, our thick, ominous binder of evidence on the table between us. Across the narrow aisle sat Ethan and my mother, with their lawyer, a slick, tired-looking man who seemed to be going through the motions. My mother maintained a posture of wounded dignity, refusing to even glance in my direction. Ethan, on the other hand, was trying to project an air of casual confidence, leaning back in his chair and whispering to his lawyer. He looked like a man who had been getting away with things his entire life and saw no reason why today would be any different. They had no idea of the avalanche that was about to be released upon them. Judge Morrison, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, called the court to order. Their lawyer went first, weaving a pathetic, tear-jerking narrative. He painted me as the cold, new-money villain, and them as the loving, simple family who were just trying to connect, only to be met with my inexplicable wrath. My mother, on the stand, dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue as she described her unbearable heartbreak over her son's cruel betrayal. Ethan testified that he had only gone to my workplace out of deep concern to try and talk things out, but was met with my unprovoked hostility and threats. It was a symphony of lies, played by two virtuosos of victimhood. Then it was our turn. Patricia stood, her presence commanding the room. "Your Honor," she began, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "The defendants have painted a compelling picture of a family misunderstanding. It is, however, a work of fiction. We are here today because my client, Leo Miller, has been subjected to a relentless and escalating campaign of harassment, intimidation, and abuse by his mother, Eleanor Miller, and his brother, Ethan Miller. They want you to believe this is about a house. It is not. It is about a lifelong pattern of parasitic behavior, and Your Honor, we have brought the receipts." Patricia began her systematic demolition. First, the trespassing. I would now like to play for the court the high-definition security camera footage from my client's property on October 12th. The large courtroom monitor flickered to life. The entire sordid affair played out in silence for a moment. The U-Haul, the illegal entry, the blaring alarm, the flashing lights. Then, Patricia unmuted the audio for one specific moment. My mother, pointing at the camera, screaming, "You are not my son anymore." The judge, who had been taking notes, stopped writing. My mother's face, a moment ago a mask of sorrow, was now sheet white. Next, Patricia moved to the harassment campaign. She had the clerk place the binder in front of the judge. Tab B, Your Honor, contains color printouts of the defendant Ethan Miller's social media posts and the subsequent threats from third parties. Tab C contains the notarized statement from my client's supervisor, Melanie Clark, detailing the defendant's unauthorized appearance and veiled threats at my client's place of employment. Ethan's smug facade was crumbling, replaced by a nervous, darting gaze. Then came the audio recordings. Patricia played the clip of Ethan threatening to find an unlocked window. Then she played the crucial clip of my call with my mother, where I explicitly told her no, and she calmly admitted to having already given Ethan the security code. The judge looked from the transcript to my mother, her expression one of utter contempt. "And finally, Your Honor," Patricia said, her voice dropping for dramatic effect. "The defendants have worked very hard to portray Ethan Miller as a harmless victim in this scenario. I would like to submit one final piece of evidence. This is a sworn and notarized affidavit from a Ms. Clara Bellwether, the defendant's former girlfriend." As she handed the document to the bailiff, I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated panic in Ethan's eyes. He knew that name. He knew what she would say. Judge Morrison read the affidavit in a heavy silence. Her expression shifted from stern to visibly disturbed. She read it once, then went back and read it a second time. She slowly took off her reading glasses, placed them on the bench, and looked directly at Ethan. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet and cold, "this affidavit alleges a pattern of financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and physical intimidation that is, frankly, almost identical to the behavior your brother has described. Is there anything you would like to say about Ms. Bellwether's sworn statement?" Ethan could only stammer. She's lying. She's a bitter ex. This is a character assassination." The judge ignored his outburst. She turned her steely gaze on my mother. "And Mrs. Miller, you testified under oath that you believed you had permission to enter your son's home. Yet this court has heard a recording of your son explicitly telling you no. To which you replied that it was too late. That is not a misunderstanding, madam. That is perjury." She picked up her glasses and her gavel. "The court finds that there is a clear and present danger of continued harassment. I am therefore granting Leo Miller a 2-year plenary restraining order against both Eleanor Miller and Ethan Miller. You are to have no contact with him whatsoever, no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no social media contact, no third-party contact. You are to stay at least 500 yards away from his person, his home, and his place of employment. Violation of this order will result in your immediate arrest and prosecution. We are done here." She banged the gavel. The sound cracked through the silent courtroom like a rifle shot. It was over. The look of utter, dumbfounded shock on my mother's and brother's faces was my ultimate vindication. They had walked into that courtroom expecting to win, as they always had. They walked out as legally recognized abusers, stripped of their power, with the full weight of the law now standing between them and me. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far, you're amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 below, it lets me know you made it this far with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also shows me that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The restraining order was the judicial equivalent of a bomb going off, and the shrapnel hit them in ways they never anticipated. The legal system, which they had tried to use as a weapon against me, now turned on them with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. Patricia, true to her word, immediately filed a motion to have my mother's ridiculous defamation lawsuit dismissed. Citing the evidence from the restraining order hearing, she argued that the suit was a textbook case of malicious prosecution, filed with the sole intent to harass. The judge, who had already witnessed their lies firsthand, agreed. The lawsuit was thrown out of court with prejudice, meaning she could never file it again. But Patricia wasn't done. She immediately filed a second motion, this one to compel them to cover my legal fees. They forced you to retain counsel to defend yourself against a baseless, vindictive attack, she had explained in a phone call. The court has mechanisms to punish that kind of behavior. We're going to make them pay for the lawyer they forced you to hire. A month later, another ruling landed in my inbox. Judge Morrison ordered Eleanor and Ethan, jointly and severally, to pay my legal fees in full, a grand total of $12,350. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My mother, whose entire financial strategy for the past decade seemed to revolve around extracting money from me, was now legally compelled to pay me. It was a humiliation far greater than any public shaming. Meanwhile, the local district attorney's office, prompted by the evidence of Ethan's false police report and the sworn statement from my boss, decided to press charges. Faced with irrefutable audio and video evidence, Ethan's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal rather than risk a trial. He pleaded no contest to misdemeanor charges of filing a false report and harassment. The sentence wasn't jail time, but it was a public flogging. 6 months of probation, a $2,500 fine, and 100 hours of community service cleaning up litter along the highway. The golden child, the one who could do no wrong, now had a criminal record. The news of the court rulings and Ethan's sentence spread through our extended family like a shockwave. The narrative they had so carefully constructed, of poor, victimized Ethan and his cruel, wealthy brother, crumbled to dust. You can't maintain a lie when public court documents and a criminal sentence are screaming the truth. The accusatory phone calls and texts stopped abruptly. The social media warriors who had attacked me fell silent. There was just quiet. I had won. On every single front, I had been legally and factually vindicated. But there was no champagne, no victory lap. There's no real joy in proving to the world that your own mother and brother are liars and abusers. There's only a profound, hollow sadness for the family you wish you had, and the quiet, bone-deep relief of a long war finally being over. The silence from their end wasn't an apology, and it wasn't a sign of remorse. It was the resentful silence of a defeated enemy. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the bridges were not just burned. The ground they once stood on had been plowed and salted. There was no going back. A few weeks after the final court ruling, I drove the 200 miles down to Wilmington. It was a gray, overcast day that matched my mood. It was the first time I'd set foot on the property since the invasion. As I unlocked the front door and walked through the silent rooms, I felt a deep sense of alienation. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene. I could almost see the ghosts of that day. Ethan on the porch, my mother's face contorted in rage. The space was contaminated by the memory of their violation. It no longer felt like mine. Standing in the living room, looking out at the gray ocean, I made a decision. It was clear, simple, and absolute. I was selling the house. I called a local real estate agent that same afternoon. When she asked why I was selling such a beautiful property so soon after buying it, I just said, "It has some bad associations. Some of my friends thought I was making a mistake." "But you won, Leo," my friend Mark said over the phone. "You fought for that house. You should keep it. Don't let them chase you away from your own dream." "I'm not being chased away," I explained. "I won the right to make my own choices, and my choice is to let it go. Keeping it would feel like living in a memorial to the worst day of my life. I'm not interested in that." Selling the house was the final act of liberation. It was me, refusing to let their toxicity define my physical space. The house sold in less than a week in the hot real estate market, and I walked away with a significant profit. I didn't tell a single member of my family. They had forfeited any right to know about my life, my finances, or my future. I began looking for a new sanctuary, a new map for my life. I knew it couldn't be by the ocean, which now felt too open, too exposed. I found myself drawn to the mountains. I found a small, rustic cabin nestled deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, quiet and intensely private, surrounded by a thick forest of ancient-feeling trees. It was smaller than the beach house, less impressive on paper, but looking at the pictures, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as I was packing boxes in my apartment for the final move, my phone buzzed with a call from a blocked number. Cold dread filled me. I knew with a visceral certainty who it had to be. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up. A new message. I hesitated, then played it. It was my mother's voice, small and hesitant, stripped of all its usual arrogance and authority. "Leo," she began. I know I'm not supposed to be calling," the lawyer said. "Anyway, I heard from Caroline that you sold the beach house. I wanted to talk about it." I stood there in the semi-darkness of my apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of my old life packed in cardboard. The old Leo, the fixer, the good son, would have called back. He would have seen this as a crack in the wall, a potential opening for reconciliation. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had a court order in my desk drawer that told me exactly what this phone call was. A test. A baited hook. A test of my new, hard-won boundaries. My finger hovered over the delete button. Then I pressed it firmly. I blocked the number. For 29 years, I had always answered her call. It was time, finally, to hang up. 6 months later, I was living in a different world. The move to the mountains was less a relocation and more a rebirth. I woke up not to the drone of city traffic, but to the intricate symphony of birdsong. My mornings started on the wide porch of my cabin, a cup of hot coffee in my hands, watching the mist burn off the rolling, blue-tinged peaks. The quiet was a tangible thing, a presence that allowed me to finally unpack the noise that had been living inside my head for years. The cabin, which I had paid for in cash with the profits from the beach house, was my fortress of peace. It had a huge stone fireplace that crackled on cool nights, and my rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Cooper, had appointed himself the guardian of our small patch of wilderness. The security system was top of the line, but for the first time, I felt it was protecting me from the outside world, not from my own family. But I was smart enough to know that a change of address doesn't heal trauma. The wounds were internal, and they needed professional attention. I found a therapist online, a woman named Dr. Karen who specialized in family systems and complex trauma. Our weekly video sessions became the most important appointment of my week. "You've been conditioned your entire life to play a specific role," she told me during one session, her words hitting me with the force of a physical impact. In dysfunctional family systems, there is often a designated fixer or responsible one. That role was assigned to you. It allowed others in the system to remain irresponsible without consequence. Your actions over the past year were not an act of aggression, Leo. They were a resignation from a toxic job you never applied for. Her reframing of the situation was a revelation. I wasn't the villain who broke the family. I was the prisoner who had finally tunneled his way out. We spent months carefully dissecting the years of manipulation, the ingrained guilt, the sense of obligation that had felt as natural as breathing. We worked on building healthy boundaries, learning to identify gaslighting, and, hardest of all, learning to forgive myself for not seeing it all sooner. It was slow, excruciating work, like resetting a bone that had healed incorrectly for decades. As my internal world began to reorder itself, my external world flourished. All the energy I had once expended on managing my family's endless, self-inflicted crises, I now poured into my career at Velmark. I was focused, creative, and motivated. I spearheaded a new digital marketing campaign that not only met its targets but shattered them, generating a 40% increase in qualified leads for the quarter. Melanie, my boss, was ecstatic. She called me into her office one day, a wide smile on her face. "Leo," she said, sliding a folder across her polished desk, "corporate has approved my proposal. We're creating a new position, and we want you to fill it. Senior Director of Digital Strategy. It comes with a significant salary increase, a larger team, and a seat at the leadership table." She looked me in the eye. "You've earned this, Leo. You went through personal hell and you didn't just survive, you thrived. You never let it affect your integrity or your work ethic. That's the kind of character and leadership we need here." I walked out of her office in a daze, the offer letter heavy in my hand. Promotion, a new home, a new therapist, a new life. For the first time, it felt like all the pieces were mine, chosen by me, for me. The ghosts of my past were still there, of course, but they no longer haunted the house. They were just faint whispers on the mountain wind, a reminder of how far I had come. One of the deepest wounds from the entire ordeal was the profound sense of isolation. In amputating the diseased limb of my immediate family, I had inadvertently cut myself off from the entire body. Aunts, uncles, and cousins had either sided with my mother or had retreated into a fearful neutrality, afraid to get caught in the crossfire. The one shining exception was my cousin, Maya. She was my dad's brother's daughter, and though we hadn't been close in recent years, we shared a bond from our childhood. She was the only person who had dared to post a comment on Ethan's viral victim post, a simple but powerful sentence. "There are two sides to every story, and I have always known my cousin Leo to be one of the most honest and hardworking people on the planet. Ethan had deleted it within minutes, but not before I had seen it. It was a single candle in a suffocating darkness. A few months after I settled into the cabin, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was an invitation to her wedding. My first reaction was a wave of anxiety. I didn't want to be the family pariah at her happy occasion. I didn't want to cause a scene or force people to choose sides. I called her, intending to politely decline. "Don't you dare, Leo Miller," she said, her voice full of warmth and laughter, cutting me off before I could even make my excuse. "You are my family. I want you there. You have to be there." She paused, then her voice grew more serious. "And for the record, they're not invited. My fiancée Jules and I made that decision months ago. Our wedding is a zero-drama zone." So I went. I drove the 5 hours to the vineyard where the wedding was held, my suit in a bag on the back seat, my stomach in knots. But the moment I saw Maya walking down the aisle, her face radiant, the anxiety melted away. At the reception, something amazing happened. I was approached by relatives I assumed had written me off. My Uncle Ben, my dad's brother, wrapped me in a bear hug. "Leo," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we heard everything that happened. I am so sorry, son. So sorry you had to go through that alone. We should have reached out, but your aunt and we just didn't know how to navigate Eleanor's storm." It turned out, I wasn't the only one who had been walking on eggshells around my mother's manipulative behavior for years. I had just been the one with the most to lose, the one who was finally pushed far enough to detonate the whole system. I spent the evening talking with cousins and relatives who shared their own stories, their own frustrations. I learned that I hadn't been an island. I had just been an isolated part of an archipelago of people tired of the drama. I wasn't an orphan. I had just been knocking on the door of the wrong family home. The biggest shock came a week after the wedding. A handwritten letter arrived. The return address was my Aunt Caroline's, the aunt who had called to tell me how ashamed she was. I almost threw it in the fireplace, but some deep curiosity made me open it. The letter was 4 pages long, written in a shaky but clear script. It was an apology, a deep, detailed, and painful apology. She wrote that after the court rulings became public knowledge within the family, she had been forced to confront a truth she had spent years avoiding. She admitted she had blindly accepted my mother's narrative without question. "I was wrong, Leo," she wrote on the final page. "It is a terrible thing to realize in your 60s that you have enabled a lifetime of toxic behavior out of a misguided sense of family loyalty. You were not the one who broke our family. You were the one who was brave enough to expose that it was already broken. I do not expect your forgiveness, but I needed to offer my apology, for my own soul. I hope you have found peace." I folded the letter and sat on my porch as the sun went down, tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a complex, cathartic release. It wasn't a full reconciliation with the life I had lost, but it was proof that truth, once it's out, can be a powerful force for change. Some bridges needed to stay burned, but maybe, just maybe, a few could be rebuilt stronger this time and on a foundation of honesty instead of lies. It's been over a year now since the judge's gavel fell and changed the trajectory of my life. I'm writing this from my favorite chair on the porch of my cabin. Cooper, my dog, is sleeping at my feet, his tail thumping softly against the wood in his dreams. The sun is setting behind the ancient, silent mountains, setting the sky on fire with strokes of orange, pink, and deep purple. The air here is clean, and the quiet is a comfortable friend. Sometimes, in these quiet moments, I think about the man I was before all of this. The man who saw his own needs as secondary, his own resources as a communal well from which others could freely draw. The man who believed that setting himself on fire to keep others warm was the definition of love. I thought my value was tied to my utility. How much could I give? How much could I fix? How much could I endure? I was wrong. That wasn't love. It was a hostage situation disguised as a family. Love without respect, I've learned, isn't love at all. It's just control wearing a prettier name. It's a one-sided contract where you are expected to pay with pieces of your soul until there is nothing left to give. I think about that 16-year-old boy I used to be, the one with a shoebox full of dreams, handing over his future because his mother cried. For years, I saw him as weak as a fool. I don't see him that way anymore. Now, I see a kid who was desperate to be loved and valued, who was taught that the only way to earn that love was through sacrifice. I wish I could go back in time and tell him that his worth is inherent, not earned. I wish I could tell him that no is a full and complete sentence, a shield to protect his spirit, not a sword to wound others. I have not heard from my mother or my brother since the court order was issued. I don't know where they live or what they're doing, and the most surprising part of my healing is the realization that I truly, deeply do not care. The vast mental and emotional real estate they used to occupy has been redeveloped. It's now home to other things. Plans for a new hiking trail, brainstorming for my next big project at work, the simple, profound joy of watching my dog chase a falling leaf. Some relationships are not meant to be salvaged. Some family ties are really just chains, binding you to a toxic past. And I know now, with a certainty that resonates in my bones, that some bridges, once burned, should stay burned. Not out of spite or anger, but as a deep and profound act of self-preservation. Because it's only when you clear away the smoke and ashes that you can finally see the horizon, breathe clean air, and begin to build something new, something strong, something that is truly entirely your own. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make an impossible choice to protect your own peace? I'd be honored if you'd share your own experiences in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes